Hello, how is it going, everybody? Today we're going to be jumping into Esther chapter 1. We finished Nehemiah yesterday. So let's get our Bibles out. And like in the beginning of every book that we've read, there's a little summary in the beginning of in my Bible that gives a little brief intro that I like to read. So let me go ahead and read that. Just a bit of it. I don't want to read too much of it. But let's start off with this. The identity of the author of Esther is unknown. However, the writer was probably Jewish and lived in Persia. A strong Jewish spirit pervades the book, particularly evident in the account of the establishment of the Jewish festival Purim. However, the author was acquainted with Persian culture, as the extensive descriptions of the palace complex at Shushan, also called Susa, and the domestic details and the reign of the king Ahasuerus indicate. For these reasons, some Jewish rabbis have ascribed the authorship of the book to Mordecai, one of its principal characters. So that would fall into the idea that they're thinking it's going to be a Jewish person who wrote the book, who had extensive knowledge in Persian culture. So Mordecai would fit that. Whoever the author was, the book of Esther was probably written shortly after the reign of Ahasuerus, no earlier than 465 BC. The author writes of the rule of Ahasuerus and the deeds of Mordecai in the past tense. Okay, indicating the book was not composed during Ahasuerus' reign. Yet, the fact that Greek words do not appear in the book rules out a date after about 300 BC, when the Greek language became more prominent in the ancient Middle East. Oh, this is interesting. On the other hand, numerous words of Persian origin in the book to its being composed during the latter half of the 5th century BC. For example, the book calls Xerxes by his Hebrew name Ahasuerus, a spelling derived from the Persian Kashiarsha. If it had been written after 300 BC, a spelling closer to the Greek form Xerxes would be expected. I find stuff like that interesting, where they take clues here and there and try and piece together the full story. So again, I like to read about that, the author of the book, but it goes into the historical background, the historical accuracy, themes, in different areas. So yeah, a lot of the intro stuff we can gather as we continue to read the book. So let's start off with chapter 1. The king dethrones Queen Vashti.
The Book of Esther. Now it came to pass, in the days of Ahasuerus, this was the Ahasuerus who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the citadel, that in the 3rd year of his reign he made a feast for all his officials and servants, the powers of Persia and Media, the nobles, and the princes of the provinces being before him, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all.
Let me just read this bit real quick. The commentary in my Bible. The kingdom of Ahasuerus extended from India, the region drained by the Indus River, to Ethiopia, Kush or northern Sudan. Provinces. The Persian kingdom under Ahasuerus was divided into small areas called provinces and larger divisions called satrapies. Okay, so that's what they meant when they said, and the princes of the provinces being before him.
Days, 180 days in all. And when these days were completed, the king made a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present in Shushan the citadel, from great to small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white and blue linen curtains fastened with cords of fine linen and purple on silver rods and marble pillars, and the couches were of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of alabaster, turquoise, and white and black marble. And they served drinks in golden vessels, each vessel being different from the other, with royal wine in abundance, according to the generosity of the king. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory, for so the king had ordered all the officers of his household that they should do according to each man's pleasure. Queen Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal palace which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman,
The
Biztha,
7th day of the feast?
Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown, in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful to behold. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, brought by his eunuchs. Therefore the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. Then the king said,
I'm curious to see. I'm sure everybody has seen like the One Night with the King or any of the different movies and books and stuff on Esther. So I'm curious to see if there's any deviations. I'm sure there are, but I'm curious to see if there are how big the deviations are that we've seen in like pop culture, in books and movies and TV shows compared to this, because Esther's a widely known story. It's a similar like like David. We've seen so many movies about David and Goliath, and it's interesting to go back to the Bible, to the source, and see what actually happened. So I want to keep an eye out on those things, the differences that are in the Bible that are not really showcased in movies and shows and stuff like that.
said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner toward all who knew law and justice, those closest to him being Karshina, Shetha, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence and who ranked highest in the kingdom.
What shall we do to Queen Vashti according to law? Because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus, brought to her by the eunuchs.
And Memucan answered before the king and the...
That's kind of crazy, because you know how scared Esther was to just come before the king, right? Because the king can just snap his fingers and you're dead. So to not obey a direct order from the king, they must have had some serious issues, right? Queen Vashti must have been angry or upset with him for some reason. Maybe it was the banquet itself, or was a prior issue that they had. Why did she not heed the king's command? Or maybe they might explain it. I don't know.
The princes.
Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes when they report King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him.
Right? Because imagine that, right? In all the houses, the people in the land, they're like, look, the queen isn't listening to her husband, to the king. Why should I listen to you? Imagine that. 100% believe that would happen. It's just said there. So they're like, oh, she's gonna set a bad example for the women of the land.
King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. This very day, the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they have heard of the behavior of the queen. Thus there will be excessive contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. When the king's decree which he will make is proclaimed throughout all his empire, for it is great, all wives will honor their husbands, both great and small.
And the reply pleased the king and the prince.
So really, that is the reason. Not just that she didn't obey, it's the ripples that this one rock in the lake will cause, right? They don't want this act to affect the rest of the kingdom, because if wives don't honor their husbands, and that will cause the family to break apart, right? If women have no respect for their husbands, the family is broken, right? So the family falls apart. If the family falls apart, the nation falls apart. So that's what they're trying to prevent from happening with this. The king and the queen should set the example for the rest of the nation, right? So if they see the queen not behaving a certain way, they'll be like, why can't I do that? So both the king and the queen need to be held accountable for their behavior. It's kind of like the idols in like K-pop and stuff like that, right? That's essentially what it is, right? They behave a certain way so that the rest of the people can look up to them and see them as idols. I mean, that's where the word idol comes from. So in a similar way, the king and the queen, you can look up to them as an example. And if your example is not being an example to you in a positive light, you're gonna use that. You can use that as an excuse, or maybe even if you don't have that predisposition to act that way, you could be influenced by their behavior, and so they're trying to avoid all that from happening.
Princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, and to every people in their own language, that each man should be master in his own house, and speak in the language of his own people.
They're really trying to get the message across. They sent it out in every language.
After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said,
"Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather all the beautiful young virgins to Shushan the citadel, into the women's quarters, under the custody of Hegai the king's eunuch, custodian of the women."
Before we continue, this first sentence seems important to me. After these things, so after all this whole drama, after what Vashti did, after dwelling on the idea that, okay, look, this is what's going to happen to the kingdom, right? There's going to be a bad influence. After they sent out the info to all the land to make sure that, the families don't break, he remembered after his wrath subsided, so the king isn't angry anymore, right? So everything is cool and calm, back to normal. He remembered what Vashti had done and what had been decreed against her. So it's I feel like this is like maybe King Ahasuerus was a wise king, right? He didn't make rash decisions in his anger. He waited till after his wrath subsided, and then he still realized, even after his wrath subsided, he still believed that, okay, Queen Vashti, I can't stick by Queen Vashti. What she did, that's inexcusable. So it's important that he didn't make that decision while he was still angry. He waited till that anger subsided, and then he made a calm, cool, collected decision. So that's cool to see.
And let beauty preparations be given them. Then, let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti.
This thing pleased the king, and he did so. In Shushan the citadel, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who were being captured with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away.
I really, back when we were reading, I think, Exodus or something, I forgot which book, there was one character that sounded like John Rhys Davies. I think that's his name. The guy who played Indiana Jones' friend in some Indiana Jones movie, I forgot, and who played Gimli in Lord of the Rings, and who also played Mordecai in One Night with the King. How hilariously awesome would it be if he does the voice for Mordecai in this? That would be crazy.
And Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it was, when the king's command and decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered at Shushan the citadel, under the custody of Hegai, that Esther also was taken to the king's palace, into the care of Hegai, the custodian of the women. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor. So he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the women. Esther had not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it.
Oh, okay.
And every day
So in this time, well, I guess we'll find out as we go on. Would the king have not picked a Jewish woman, a Hebrew woman? I mean, can't you really tell just by the looks? Well, yeah, I don't. Yeah, let's see. Let's keep going before I look at anything else.
not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. And every day Mordecai paced in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. Each young woman's turn came to go in to King Ahasuerus.
Because as far as we know, right, the Persians were the ones that freed the Jews from Babylon and allowed them to build a temple in Jerusalem and all that stuff. So why would they be against the Jews? Why would they hate on the Jews? Why hide it from the king? I don't know. Okay, I don't. Let's see my Bible. Ezra 2 chapter 10. Ezra chapter 2 verse 10. Many reasons have been suggested concerning Esther's hesitation to reveal her national origin. The time does come when Esther would identify herself and her people, see chapter 8. In fact, her self-disclosure would come at the point when danger to her person was highest. Okay, so they just said many reasons, but they didn't give any of them. Let's look it up. Why didn't Esther reveal her nationality to the king? Or here, why did Mordecai? Why not? Did the Persians hate the Jews? Was there a racist issue? I don't think so. While Haman had not been promoted to the following position, he probably was in the position of influence. He was probably in a position to influence the selection of the queen. Remember the account of Israel defeating King Agag of Amalek is in 1 Samuel 15. Some time afterward, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. He advanced him and seated him higher than any of his fellow officials. All the king's courtiers in the palace gate knelt and bowed low to Haman, for such was the king's order concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel or bow low. Okay, that's in Esther 3, 1-2. So maybe it says Mordecai would not kneel or bow low. So Mordecai knew what was up with Haman. So it was probably not the king. The reason Mordecai was not afraid of the king or the people of Persia. He was afraid of Haman. But I don't want to read too much because we're going to jump into Esther 3. So let's just keep on going.
After she had completed 12 months' preparation, according to the regulation for the women, for thus were the days of their preparation apportioned, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women.
Dang, what kind of skincare beauty routine
Thus
is
prepared,
this?
each young woman went to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of Sheashgaz, the king's eunuch who kept the concubines. She would not go to the king again unless the king delighted in her and called for her by name. Now when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, to go into the king, she requested nothing but what Hegai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised.
But the king had already taken a liking to her, right? It says, now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor. So he readily gave beauty preparations. Oh, wait, into the care of Hegai. Okay. So not the king, Hegai. Okay, my bad.
The king, she requested nothing but what Hegai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast, the Feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants. And he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces and gave gifts according to the generosity of a king. When virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat within the king's gate. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai as when she was brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on a gallows.
Dang. Oh.
And it was written in the
sound
book
effects.
of the Chronicles, in the presence of the king.
Book of the Chronicles, we had that mentioned in Nehemiah.
After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed, and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. Then the king's servants, who were within the king's gate, said to Mordecai,
Why do you transgress the king's command?
Now it happened, when they spoke to him daily, and he would not listen to the...
Okay, do you think it was because he didn't bow? In the sense that you don't bow to a human, right? You only bow to God. I don't think that's the case, right? Because I'm sure he bowed to the king. It was more so he didn't... I'm focused on this part. Pay homage to Haman. He didn't agree with Haman, what Haman believed. And if Haman, had a conspiracy against the Jews, I can see why.
them that they told it to Haman, to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people
Well, that's
of
the answer right
Mordecai.
there. That's why Mordecai told Esther not to reveal her nationality.
In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is, the lot, before Haman to determine the day and the month, until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus,
There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore,
don't?
it is
How do
not
you know
fitting
this?
for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work to bring it into the king's treasuries.
So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews.
The enemy of the Jews. Holy. But notice how he didn't let the king know who he was talking about. He just said, there are these people that don't follow your laws, blah, 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 right? He didn't name them by name, because maybe if he did, the king would be like, okay, yeah, I'm not on board with what you're saying. So he was leaving out information to get what he wanted, looks like.
And the king said to Haman,
The money and the people are given to you, to do with them as seems good to you.
Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials of all people, to every province according to its script, and to every people in their language.
Again, making sure everybody knows.
In the name of King Ahasuerus, it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring. And the letters were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children
Dang.
and women, in one
Full-on
day,
genocide.
on the 13th day of the
In
12th
one
month,
day.
which is the month of
Kill everybody, women, children, elderly, men. I don't even know what. Can you even do that? That's a lot of killing for one day. Holy.
Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the document was to be issued as law in every province, being published for all people that they should be ready for that day. The couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed.
The couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. So at this point, I hope that the king Ahasuerus knows that it's a decree to annihilate the Jews, right? If he didn't, he's not doing a great job, right? But the entire city is perplexed. They're like, whoa, what's going on here? You're literally about to kill all the Jews. Why? So the people of Shushan don't understand what's going on. So you can tell the people don't agree with what Haman was up to. And I don't know if the king is still ignorant in all this. You know? If there's letters being sent out, people talking, everybody knows. How does the king not know? The king has to know. Let's see. Chapter 3, verse 15. Let's see what my commentary's got to say about this. The contempt of the king and Haman, who sat down to drink while this message was being delivered, cannot help but strike a responsive chord of empathy for the Jewish people among the readers of this book. The text notes that even the people in the city of Shushan were perplexed. There's also another interesting note. The month Adar they said it was the 12th month, but apparently that corresponds to February to March for the calendar we use today. Yeah, I'd be interested to look into the Jewish calendar and see the actual workings of it, right? So, like, Nisan is their first month. And I mean, we sort of looked at it yesterday a bit with the Jewish calendar, but like, you know, why, I want to know like why they ordered the months the way they did, you know? Because I'm assuming all they had to go off was like their calendar was a luni-solar calendar, right? They used the sun and the moon. Where's chapter 4? We're at the moon for the months.
When Mordecai learned all that had happened, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city. He cried out with a loud and bitter cry.
I'm so surprised the king
He
is
went
going
as
on
far
with
as the
this.
front of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes.
You literally know the day you're
So
going
Esther's
to die.
maids and eunuchs came and told her, and the queen was deeply distressed. Then she sent garments to clothe Mordecai and take his sackcloth away from him, but he would not accept them.
Right? Because she wanted to protect him. You are outing everybody already knew he was a Jew, right? He said it. But, you know, maybe if you don't, you pretty much, you know, the sackcloth and the ripping of the garments and all that stuff, that's really putting a spotlight on it. So it's either that or she didn't want to see her uncle in a sort of, you know, in a not so proper way, right? You know, give him some clothes and stuff, but looks like he refused.
sackcloth away from him, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her, and she gave him a command concerning Mordecai to learn what and why this was. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given at Shushan, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and that he might command her to go into the king to make supplication to him.
We just had the kings of Persia doing favors to the Jews. And then now look.
And plead before him for her people. So Hathach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai.
All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king, who has not been called, he has but one law: put all to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go into the king these 30 days.
So they told Mordecai Esther's words.
That's sort of interesting, right? Esther has the exact opposite problem of Queen Vashti. Queen Vashti didn't come to the king when she was called, and Queen Esther is about to go to the king when she wasn't called. Exact opposite.
And Mordecai told them to answer Esther,
Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet, who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?
Okay, so this is the difference between all these movies we've seen and the actual text, right? In a lot of these movies, Mordecai continues that very protectiveness over Esther, and he is like, don't go to the king, you're gonna die and all that stuff, right? But here he's telling her to. He's saying, if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? So it's exact opposite. Mordecai is saying, this might be your calling. This might be why you were put in this place.
Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai.
Go, gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan, and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish.
So, do you think the maids knew that she was Jewish? Because what would the reason be? Why would they fast? What do you think Esther told them? Like, hey, I don't want you guys to eat for 3 days. And they're like, why? Because if she outed herself to her servants, they're servants, they want to move up, they want to gain favor from authority. You think they would go and tell Haman or go and tell the king that, whoa, Esther is a Jew? They might, unless they had developed a close bond with Esther. But we don't really know that. But that's interesting to think about, Do you think Esther told her servants that she was Jewish? And if not, what do you think she told them to get them to actually fast for 3 days?
So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded him. Now it happened on the third day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house, facing the entrance of the house. So it was, when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, that she found favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter.
It makes sense why the king would be more accepting of Esther showing up, because I feel like showing up unannounced versus not showing up when you're expected isn't as, like, you know, showing up unannounced isn't as nearly as bad as not showing up when you're expected, because one is you're not doing something that's wanted of you, and the other is doing something that's not even unwanted. It's just not, you know what? It's not like he didn't want her to show up. It was not on his mind. So I feel like what Vashti did is a whole lot worse. A whole lot worse than what Esther did. So and you can gauge that from the king's response.
And the king said to her,
"What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you, up to half the kingdom."
Ooh.
If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him.
Bring Haman quickly, that he may do as Esther has said.
So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. At the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther,
I feel like the movies and
is
stuff are pretty
your
accurate
petition?
so far.
It shall
compared
be
to the actual
granted you.
text.
What is your request? Up to half the kingdom. It shall be done.
What if she actually said half the
My
kingdom?
petition and request is this. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said.
So Haman went out that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand,
So Haman is happy because he gets to go to another banquet.
or tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. And he
Dang, Haman, come on, man. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. You want this guy to be scared of you? Okay, all right.
He sent and called for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches, the multitude of his children, everything.
I mean, thinking from his perspective, he's moving up, right? He got this decree passed. He had a private dinner with the queen put on a private dinner for him and the king, right? He's probably feeling like I'm the king's right-hand man right now. So he's happy.
In which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and servants of the king.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to the banquet that she prepared. And tomorrow, I am again invited by her, along with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai, the Jew, sitting at the king's gate.
Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him,
Let a gallows be made, 50 cubits high.
Dang, all his wife and his friends are
Suggest to the king
Jew haters
that
too?
Mordecai be hanged on it. Then Go merrily with the king to the banquet.
And the thing pleased Haman.
Come on,
So
lady.
he had the gallows made.
So the gallows were made just for Mordecai. Okay. All right, that's it. Esther 5. Tomorrow we'll jump into Esther 6. Let's get a tiny little sneak peek. All right. Haman's about to be really mad. The king honors Mordecai. Yeah. So Haman's getting the exact opposite of what he wanted. So we'll continue with the story of Esther tomorrow, and we're going to finish it off tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. And then we are going to jump into an extremely interesting book, the book of Job. Some say that Job was written even before Genesis. So that's going to be a really interesting book. A lot of insight into that. Insight into the relationship between God and Satan and God and man. Yeah. Job is going to be really interesting to go through. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's reading. Tomorrow we'll jump into the second half of Esther, and hope to see you all there tomorrow, all right? Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.